This question says that Christians have argued that the emergence of modern science premised on presupposition of the Christian worldview.
Yeah.
What are some of these unique features of the Christian worldview that are the basis of the origin of modern science? There must be something unique about this Christian worldview that allowed this to happen, right? Modern science, the emergence or origin of the modern science.
Yeah. I think this was quite a popular academic discussion 30, 40 years ago actually. Whereas so far from the way we have approached the issue, Christianity seems to be put on the defensive. We are the secondary guys trying to come to terms with science. But if you go back and look at the history differently, we say, oh no, Christianity doesn't have to be so defensive. On the contrary, Christianity plays the crucial role in the emergence of modern empirical science. Now, I have chosen this phrase very carefully.
Okay.
Modern empirical science. There were some kind of sciences in ancient Greece, in Egypt, in Babylonia, in China, and India. But the word empirical, I think, is very important.
From observation? Empirical means
observation and testing.
Testing, okay.
Let me give an example. The ancient Greeks gave us a great heritage in their ingenious examination of the world. They were the ones who talked about that. First of all, they say nature is rational, the logos. And because nature is rational, it's open to inquiry, it could be understood. But the problem is that while they say nature is inherently intelligible, their venture was aborted by some other reason. Because the Greeks are Thales, Thales, one of the earliest one of the earliest Greek philosophers, when he was examining magnetism, he said everything is full of gods. So in one sense, the world is kind of divine. If that's the case, you don't quite intervene with it. So then they have this great confidence in the power of the mind, the rational mind, to get to understanding the essence of things, rationalism. The plus side is they believe in that the universe can be understood because it's rational, it is simple, it is systematic, and so it is to the Greeks that we owe mathematics and geometry, all foundational tools for science. But on the other hand, because of their religious background, like Thales, in observation of magnetic properties, make an exclamation, everything is full of God, small g-o-d-s. So if the world around us is divine, so to say, your natural instinct is not to tamper with it, unlike modern empirical science. So that was one great hindrance. One philosopher said, it seems as though the Greeks were trying to study the world with their eyes closed, because what you need is to theorize in your mind, you see. So, but nonetheless, we have valid contribution from them, and that contribution was passed on to the Arabian Muslims when they took over the world at the time. And the Muslims themselves did provide great innovations like water pumps, mills, gear, astronomical instruments, mechanical clocks, and stuff like that. There was a period of learning in Islamic science, but there was a certain limit to it also. Insofar as Islamic philosophy and science were built on, not just influenced on Greek science. So they were influenced by Aristotle and the Neoplatonists with the hierarchy of reality.
Is it a translation of Aristotelian work into Arabic, right?
Yeah, certainly by the Christians actually.
Oh, by Christians.
And because to be fair, the Muslims really valued learning at the time. But then you see, in the process, the idea of science was Aristotelian. Aristotle would look at the world through what is called the four causes. The material cause, which is the material side, the formal cause of the things, the efficient cause, which brings about the difference, and then the teleological or purpose clause. So it looks at the world through these categories that leave the world as it is, trying to understand it as it is. So not direct intervention as much, but the ingenuity of engineering projects is not in doubt. One interesting thing is, one of the dominant philosophy, if not the dominant philosophy of Islamic science, is this thing called occasionalism. Because God is totally sovereign, He is the direct causation of everything, and there's no room for what you call secondary causation. Secondary causation is how objects affect one another. So if you already rule out secondary causation, that's one of the foundations of
so this is Islamic
occasionalism. So you need to do two things. One is that you need to go beyond the Greek rationality, and then there must be a reason to believe and take seriously secondary causation or interaction between created materials. This thing actually came, very interestingly, in the medieval time, after Thomas Aquinas. You have Occasionism, never mind. From there came the emphasis on will rather than reason. But more important than that was, you may say, Francis Bacon came along. Francis Bacon was you may say, the kind of one of the origins of empirical science. The reason is, first of all, the Christian idea of creation came in. Because now the Christian believe in the creator God. The creation is orderly and law undergirded by law. So that one is in line with the Greek science, rationalism. But secondly, because God created the world is a creation. A creation means it's contingent. Contingent means it's not absolute, you know. If it's contingent
on some causes.
Some causes, that's right. So therefore, you say, okay, what is it contingent on? So you have already shifted your perspective to interaction between things.
Okay.
So which is what science is all about. In fact, Francis Bacon has this interesting criticism of the Aristotelian science. He says the final causes of teleology is sterile and like a virgin consecrated to God produces nothing. So he says you must intervene with nature so that it will yield answers to your questions. So I think for this reason, so if I may say, Hookyaas, Hoykaas, actually argue that it was a Christian scientist who could balance theorizing and experimentation. Theorizing based on understanding the world as a rational order, law-based because of the creator, and experimentation because understanding the contingency of nature means you must know how they interact with one another. So I think if I may just read what it said, says Christian faith provides the crucial impetus for the development of modern experimental science by liberating man from the limits of inquiry that resulted from the Greek religious outlook of a deified nature. Christian stewardship of creation also encouraged the development of science and technology in order to utilize natural resources for the betterment of life. Then Rodney Stark is very prolific sociologist who study different aspects of history of Christianity. So he concludes this way: science was not the work of Western secularists or even deists. It was entirely the work of devout believers in an active, conscious creator God. In this way, at least Western civilization really was God-given. So just to recap.
You didn't wear your microphone panel.
So to summarize it, so contrary to the myth that Christianity is being in conflict with science, surely doesn't have anything to contribute to science. On the contrary, Christianity plays this crucial role, in the emergence of modern science. In fact, there's one atheist and evolutionist. His name is Laurent Eiseli, Laurent Eiseli, who says, very interesting, he says, this is not a believer, he says, the philosophy of experimental science began its discovery and made use of its methods in the faith, not the knowledge, that it was dealing with a rational universe controlled by a creator who did not act upon with whim or interfere with the forces he had set in operation. It is surely one of the curious paradoxes of history that science, which professionally has little to do with faith, owe its origin to an act of faith that the universe can be rationally interpreted, and that today's science is sustained by that assumption.
Okay, so I hear from your answer that you have spoken about something about belief in a rational creator, that there is a rational and orderly universe, and man being. Do you think the image of God is important in man?
That is not the direct. It didn't feature out actually many of the writings. Although after all these years, we can justify science as one of the vocation of man, being the steward of creation.
I heard
it's also
creation,
what's the chief purpose of man? To create God and to enjoy Him forever. So to think God's thoughts after Him must surely be the underlying spirit of scientific inquiry.
Okay.
And how can we think God's thoughts of Him? Because we are made in His image. That's the one way I can link the two together.
Okay.
But I don't really see it in the science books.
Okay.